Running for Congressional District 2. Derek, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Alan. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, and I know you have a booming voice, but use the mic anyway. If you were a sandwich, what kind of sandwich would you be? That was not on the list.
Don't take that off my time. That's, yeah.
That was not on the list. So I'm surprised I didn't think about asking this earlier, but the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act passed in 2017 is about to expire. I'm sorry?
Why is he ready?
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. First question, like I'm already getting to the end. Opening question, why are you running? Thank you, Shireen.
Yes, thank you, Shireen. That's good. So, well, thank you very much for hosting this to the Chamber. Thanks for all of you for being out. Thanks for the conversation. It was said at the start, and I'll say it at the end, how fortunate we are to be able to have these sorts of conversations as we choose together our direction going forward. It is a wonderful country that we live in. You know, look, I often summarize the answer to that question, why am I running, in this line. We live in serious times in our country with serious challenges, problems we need to make progress on, if not solve. And serious times call for serious minds. If it were easy, it would be done by now. The truth of the matter is we got to have folks who are willing to sort of get in, metaphorically roll up their sleeves and deal with the kinds of issues that we've been talking about here tonight, whether it's immigration policy, trade policy, tax policy, spending policy. If you kick it down the road again, it just gets worse for our kids. I'm in to be part of solving some of that.
Terrific. So I will thank you again, Shireen. It's like we have an informal process here. So I started to ask about the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, and gosh, was it December 2017? Is going to expire in 2025. So it's going to cause a huge tax increase, but there's also a fiscal aspect to it. Do you support its continuation? Would you want to alter it in any way? Like, why or why not?
Yeah, I do support extending the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. I think we need to make its main provisions permanent. I think it has been a tremendous driver of growth. I think if you look at federal revenues, you had a slight dip after it was implemented, but revenues have continued to grow dramatically since then. We've seen business investment come home from abroad, which was one of the objectives, and every single American who pays taxes got some type of tax benefit from it. All of that gets reversed if we don't extend the provisions of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. So we must do that. Now, to the more nuanced part of your question, I mean, I've served in a state legislature. I've been around Congress over the years. I have never seen a tax bill that just passes clean. That is not the way tax policy gets made in this country, and it's not what's going to happen with the extension on the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. So we're going to have a debate, those who serve in Congress and those who are engaged in the process, about how you tweak it, what you do, what wasn't right in it, what can be done better in it. That's the nature of making tax policy, and I look forward to engaging in that. I mean, I'll give you one specific example. It's kind of down in the weeds, but it's something a lot of folks in the 2nd District business community have talked with me about. One of the pay-fors that was in the statute was extending out, amortizing the payback on some research and development investment. It used to be expensible in a single year. It's now stretched over multiple years. That has the effect of skewing R&D investment decisions, and not in a positive way. I'd like to see if we can figure out a way to undo what I think was a bad piece of policy in the statute as we go forward.
So we've talked about trade, I think, with all of the candidates. What do you think the role of Congress versus the executive branch, and also tariffs? I'll just throw out the kind of general trade and free trade issue. Again, Kansas is a fairly significant exporting state.
Yeah, well, not surprisingly, I think nearly every candidate's said some version of this tonight. I am instinctively a free trade individual, and whoever said it, I think it was Ron, Congressman Estes said it, a tariff is a tax. And so I'm a low tax guy, I'm a low tariffs guy. Realistically, you can't be a zero tax guy because you have to pay for operations of government services. And realistically, you can't be a zero tariffs guy across the board in all cases. There are times that it makes sense from an American public policy standpoint to be very aggressive on trade policy. And sometimes a tariff has to be a tool that's in that toolbox. We've never had a time it wasn't, at least in modern American history. So that's not a groundbreaking statement. My philosophy is less is better. I certainly don't want to see. I'm made uneasy by some of the discussion in the campaign trail now, not our campaigns, but more generally in the country, about these sort of very aggressive, very large tariff increases. That is not where I'd like to see us go. But I also think we need to be mindful. I'll tell you a story just real quick, and then we can move on. But
hey, this is your time.
A lot's been said tonight, and I agree with it, about the critical importance of having open foreign markets where people in this room and others in the Kansas business community can sell our agriculture goods, our manufactured goods, our products, our services abroad. Absolutely true. That's why we want a good, strong U.S. trade representative to go do battle for us to open those markets. There is the other side of that, however, and I actually think this is one of the reasons President Trump won in 2016, and I saw it in my home. NAFTA philosophically was a free trade agreement that philosophically I think a lot of us that are free traders would agree with, but boy, I think it was improved by the USMCA update in this prior administration. And there were consequences to NAFTA that were real for real people in Kansas. I saw a major employer in my hometown in Independence close up shop after NAFTA, move its operations down to a new plant just south of the border and reopen it. And hundreds of people, most of whom I knew and grew up with their kids, who that had been their principal livelihood, in some cases for generations, to this day, they never found really solid, stable, reliable employment again. And what their government said to them was, you got to do this because it's for the good of the whole. It's better for everybody. Grows the economy, opens markets, rising tide floats all boats. Sorry how it affected you. Here's some trade adjustment assistance, a government payment. If you don't think those folks have a real and legitimate basis to be distressed about American trade policy, then I'd like to take you down and sit down with them sometime. There are real consequences to these choices. So my philosophy is less. I also recognize the reality we got to be tough and do battle on some of this and defend our American interests.
Eric, how much time we got? 3:45. Oh, we have plenty of time to talk about world peace and lots
I'm
of stuff.
for it.
Who is it? So the Inflation Reduction Act included a number of regulatory changes aimed at combating climate change, if you think it should be combated. What's your approach as a member of Congress about regulatory, you heard some of the other questions, but new rules and regulations, how do you review the old rules and regulations? What are your general thoughts about the role of the executive branch with rules and regs?
Yeah, well, the Inflation Reduction Act, the IRA, whatever you want to call it, was one of two principal big, enormous spending packages that passed during COVID, with COVID as the justification, or COVID's consequences as the justification, strictly on a party line vote, and I believe in both cases with Vice President Harris casting the tie-breaking vote. And I would argue, this wasn't your question, but I would argue they have been a huge contributor and a driver to the price hikes and the inflation we've seen around too many dollars chasing too few goods, too much overspending that wasn't necessary. So I'm not a big fan of the Inflation Reduction Act, which I think was wholly calling that bill the Inflation Reduction Act is like calling that city in southwest Kansas liberal Kansas. It's nice, but it is inaccurately named. And I think that's true for the IRA as well. With respect to the regulatory piece, however, look, we haven't talked a lot about it today. It's been mentioned a couple of times over the course of my friends and colleagues who have gone before me. But I actually think, one of the reasons I would like to serve right now, I think we have a moment in American history to actually do something about this explosive growth in the regulatory state, the federal regulatory state. Look, nobody's arguing you don't need federal agencies and you don't need federal regulations, but it's an order of magnitude upon an order of magnitude upon an order of magnitude greater today than it was just 2 generations ago. People talk in terms of the fourth branch of the federal government, the unelected branch, the alphabet soup agencies, and there's a reason that people smile when you say that, because it's true. I would submit that there are more people in this room and people we work with and for and work for us out in the real world whose lives are affected more by decisions made by people, by regulators, by bureaucrats, whatever you want to call them, by the deep state. I mean, lots of different names that different people use, by federal employees who nobody's ever heard of and nobody ever voted for, than they will be by the decisions made by those of us running for public office and putting ourselves out there as candidates, because that's the point we've reached in this country. The reason we are at a moment we can do something about it is, it was alluded to a little earlier, we had not just one but a couple of decisions from the U.S. Supreme Court this past term. We had the rollback on Chevron deference. I think Paul mentioned that, if I'm not mistaken, which, it's a huge step. Chevron was well intended. Justice Scalia cooked it up. I mean, it was designed to curtail an out-of-control judiciary. Unfortunately, that's not the problem we have right now. We have an out-of-control bureaucracy, and Chevron empowered that. And I think the court's decision to roll that back invites Congress to actually try to reassert some control. And the other decision was a Seventh Amendment decision that talks about agency fines. We can talk about it in a different setting, but it may actually be bigger than Chevron. So here's the bottom line. There is a moment to deal with this overregulation problem that I think is enormous, and I hear it everywhere I go in the 2nd District. Took us generations to get in. It'll take a long time to get out, and it's not going to be headline grabbing. It's going to be down in the weeds, roll up your sleeves, do the dirty work of oversight. If the press isn't noticing it, no criticism, it probably means you're doing your job pretty well in making agency managers answer for what they're doing.
So you're at your time, but we're still going to give you a close. I will just say it's kind of funny that, and Paul did a great job bringing up Chevron. Like, I suggested that's a question, and then Shireen asked me, well, how do you ask the question? It's like, I don't know. I just know the Chevron decision is a big deal. I don't know how to ask the question. So why should the Kansas business community in the 2nd Congressional District vote for you?
Well, thanks for hosting this tonight, and thanks for being out. We got a lot of friends in this room and out around the 2nd District because we know each other. We've worked together for a long time in different roles. You know where I am on business issues, on regulation issues, on taxation issues, on human resource issues, on spending issues. There's no surprises here. What you see is what you get. I believe that ultimately we are better off as a state, a district, a country, and as individuals when we allow people the freedom to make their own choices with their own capital, working with others in a competitive marketplace or with their neighbors and their need in a community, whatever it is that motivates them, rather than having, a bunch of, I'll say central planners, that's a bit of an overstatement, but a bunch of elected people or a bunch of unelected people either in Topeka or Washington telling them how to live their lives. I believe that. And so that's what you get. Should I get to serve? I would be very honored to have that opportunity. And I think we can leave things better than we found it, which ought to be the measure for any of us that want to serve.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely.